Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to our inaugural rebranding episode of what, due to YouTube shenanigans, I have solo elected to start titling this podcast series E2KG Entertainment Street Level. So, sorry, Dave, that I did not get a chance to talk that over with you. I had to.
It's okay.
We had previously, for stuff like this, been calling the series Marvel Knights. But I am trying to, as much as possible, skew far away from any actual brand names or copyrighted IP names in the titles of our podcasts due to our negative experience on our own channel. So I will definitely be hung by my toes if I wreck the Geeks Worldwide, our parent radio network channel, by angering the YouTube gods, which is easy to do because their rules are not printed anywhere, but you can still get the ban hammer. So this particular two-parter is where we're going to cover The Punisher. So we're a little behind. I guess, did the show drop in like November?
I think you're right. I think it was a November drop.
Okay, so we were busy covering The Gifted, and as it is for right now, the E2KG Entertainment crew, which consists of Dave and myself, another branding name, which I've struck out on my own, Dave, and elected to apply to you and I, because I've been struggling to find something to call us.
We're only actually a month behind. It launched a month ago, almost, exactly.
Okay, good. So we're really not that far behind. We were busy covering The Gifted, and because it's just two of us that do this podcast, we have just historically trended towards only covering one show at a time, typically a short format show in the anywhere from 6 to 15 episode kind of ilk. So we wanted to focus on The Gifted. It was hard enough for me, at least, to keep up, particularly with the games crew winding down for the end of the year and our big kind of season finale. The games crew is now on hiatus. The entertainment crew still has a couple things to get done before we get a break. That is mainly we did want to cover The Punisher because we covered The Defenders as well, and we kind of want to maintain that continuity. So, as always, I am one of your hosts, Agasicles Stamus, from the E2KG network, or the Enough to Keep Going network, a affiliate podcast network of our larger parent, Geeks Worldwide. And as always, I am joined by my partner in crime, Mr. Dave Petches. Dave, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good.
Good. Awesome. So, let's get right to it. I don't have any prepared notes for tonight. My commute home wound up being late. I got stuck in the office. Wife told me to stop and pick up pull-ups for the girls, so it took me a while longer to get home. I did not get home in time enough to watch both watch the 6th episode, which I was wrapping up, and do prepared talking notes. So we're just gonna go right into the discussion. So, and already walking into it, I kind of felt like this was not a show where I wanted to do a deep breakdown of every single episode because we're trying to cover 6 episodes. I did kind of want to was going to propose that we cover kind of overall feelings as well as some high points and low points of the first 6 episodes so far. So I will start off by saying I am surprised at myself that I am pretty up on this show.
Yeah. I'm with you. After the first episode, I was very cautious how the tone was going to be. And I feel after the first episode, it was a totally different mood.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. So I guess I want to talk a little bit about our history with this character, because Dave, I want to definitely understand where you're coming from with it. And we kind of do this at the outset of every episode, our familiarity with the characters, whether or not we're into these, the cast from the comics, etc. So for me, I never liked the Punisher in the comics.
Oh yeah, it's totally, the War Journal series is totally brutal.
You're right, and I just, for me, growing up as a kid in comics, I just always felt like the Punisher was kind of that ultra-violent character with the comic filled with bullets and guns. I never understood why that type of character was thrust into the middle of a capes and tights kind of setting, and I always felt like it was just done to appeal to the testosterone driven ultra machismo of the 80s, preteen and teen male who were big consumers of things like Commando and Predator and Rambo, and all of those things were things I didn't like as a kid. I never liked Rambo. I did like I I wasn't a huge fan of Commando. I did like Predator. That appealed to me a little more, but I was never a huge fan of the movies that were just gratuitous violence, and it felt like that's what that comic was. Now, watching the show, I need to go back and pull the thread on this a little more. I may have just had an autonomous, visceral reaction, negative reaction to the comic. I didn't realize that the Punisher was created partially by Jerry Conway, who is one of my favorite comic book writers and helmed the Teen Titans through a large part of their Renaissance years, and was also a principal writer on books in the DC universe that I really love, like Firestorm. So I don't know, where are you coming from with the character before the start of the show, as far as your exposure to him in comic books or movies or any other media formats?
Yeah, I mean, I have one of the trade backs for the Punisher, the War Journals, and I've read a couple of single issues for different Punisher variants. I feel like I should pull out my trade back and like show it to everybody, but I wasn't prepared for props, so I'm sorry about that. But no, when I read that comic, I was like, oh, geez, like this is pretty brutal. Like the way that he violently kills people, and the villains are pretty violent, and I just, the first episode was kind of going on that edge of, is this going to be pretty violent and gory and all about blood? But I felt like I noticed like right away, like the comic and the series is different. There's major differences, and like the major ones that I feel like is that there's not as much violence as I expected, and there's a lot of talk about PTSD and soldiers, vets coming back, and I feel like if you want to look into it, almost all these Netflix ones kind of talk about a social issue here and there, and this was kind of more the focus for Punisher, which really shocked me, and some moments were very touching. And one of the things that I appreciated was I kind of the character of Micro. I was like, wait a second. It seems every 80s and 90s comic book movie tended to make the tech guy some fat white dude with glasses sitting behind a computer, and instead we get this younger, cooler, funny hipster guy with a gnarly ass beard for a tech person. And I was like, thank you. Like, finally, like, you know, the tech guy has kind of a cooler kind of representation than the Punisher. And I just love it how this series like totally flipped around kind of the your typical what you would expect from the Punisher, typical what you would expect from various things. I love that you have Madani is a very powerful female character in the series, and I think it's just amazing. And I forget, gosh, the Iranian actor who plays her mother is in there, and I've seen her in a couple of things. She's in one of the big sci-fi shows, and she played a huge part in that. The Expanse, and if I say her name, I'll probably get it wrong, but it's just been a very good series overall, and definitely I don't think it's going on the lines of like it's going to be all blood and gore like the War Journal is. And even the character Billy Russo, as much as a slime ball that he's turning out to be at the end of episode 6, I don't think he doesn't even have the backstory of the Billy Russo in the comics, if you recall too, Gisicles.
And no, I don't, because I just never read those. Most of my exposure to the Punisher comes from like crossover events and things. Like I can't remember the name of it, but there was one that I read, I guess probably through Comixology. I don't know if I've read the whole arc, but it's kind of where like all of the characters in the Marvel universe like go after the Punisher, and he basically like either takes them down or miraculously escapes all of them one by one. Like he fights Spider-Man, he fights Elektra, he fights Black Widow, and probably my longest enduring exposure to him was when in my recurring monthly pull list I was reading Thunderbolts. And he was one of the characters on General Ross's Thunderbolts on that team. So I read him for kind of about a year, and there was a thing between him and Elektra. So that's probably my largest amount of exposure to him. So it's interesting some of the things that you said, because there are actually some of the major points that I wanted to cover. So I go into the series not being up on the Punisher, quite frankly, expecting to dislike it. I have not watched all of season 2 of Daredevil, so I didn't see him arrive on the show. I don't know exactly what that show covered with his relationship with Karen Page. I will say, very pleased to see. What is her name? I think it's Deborah Ann Wall from True Blood, and also who has been playing Karen Page on Daredevil and the Defenders.
He was pretty brutal too in the Daredevil, so I also had that expectancy that this was going to be something violent. And the trailer too for Punisher made me believe that this was going to be all about violence and all that, and gun shooting. I don't know if they edited any gun scenes out because of recent events. I don't think they did, though.
I don't think so either. And I wasn't really up on the show through the first 3 episodes, and of course by now, and I'm a little wary. I need to spend some time kind of doing some introspection on this, because I wonder if now I've just been kind of institutionalized to hang in and bear with the extremely slow burn that all of these Netflix Marvel Universe shows go through. It seems to be an inherent creative pattern. But I was a little less bored with this one than I normally am for the first 3 episodes. Episode 4 really kind of turned the corner for me. And as that episode started, which was called Resupply, I was walking around I was getting ready to sit down and watch episode 4. I was walking around the house. I was getting my coffee. I went up and down the stairs a few times, and I had 5-10 minutes to kind of really try and pull my thoughts together on how I felt about the series so far. And I was trying to put my finger on it, because that's what this show is about, right? Lots of people, right, in most of our day-to-day lives, and probably our viewers' lives, say that they like or they dislike a thing. But what we really try and do in this show, and with all the shows on the E2KG network, is to deepen that conversation and then really talk about the reasons why, and then sometimes argue about the validity of those reasons and rationale. And before I was sitting down to watch episode 4, my big thing was, what is it about this show that I'm not liking, that's not clicking with me? And when it boiled down to it, I was like, I barely like the Punisher. I barely grasp that character. And I get it. And I get the tragedy and that whole setup with his family being killed and everything. And again, that's more near and dear, and I relate more to that now as a parent. But I was like, I barely grasp the character of the Punisher. And I'm like, and then on top of that, in this show, we have all these additional stories going on. And I'm like, I don't really care about those characters, right? Walking into episode 4, I was like, I don't really care about Madani, and I don't really care about Billy Russo, and I don't really care about Andrew. And I mean, and I get it. Those are stories. I'm not questioning their importance, but I'm like, I don't want that in this show. Like, it's too much. And and I think this show, more than any of the other shows up to this point, I think, has the most subplots going on, right? So you have Andrew, you have Andrew as a standalone character. You have Andrew and his interaction with O'Connor. You have the Andrew story, and it's got 3 like plot threads of its own with his interrelationship with other people on the show. You have Frank Castle and his interaction with Karen Page. You have the flashback subplot. You have there's like 12 different subplots in the show.
And there's major villains too from the comics. You have Agent Orange and Billy Russo.
Right. So as I'm sitting down to watch episode 4, I'm like this show just has so much baggage, and I'm sorry, there's just lots of these characters that I don't care about, right? But episode 4 to me really pulled it together, and I tell you what really did it for me in episode 4, and the reason why I'm willing to bear all these other subplots, is the relationship between Frank Castle and Dave Lieberman is one of the best relationships that I've seen in these Marvel shows. It's amazing. To me, it's amazing, and it's amazing what the weird, quirky thing, and the one I've been sitting on the edge of my seat, like going, like, is this going to go sideways? Is this going to get weird all of a sudden? And that's been the Frank Castle interaction with the Lieberman family, because there's a point. This is a spoiler show, by the way. If we're doing the show with the assumption that you've already watched these same episodes and you want to sit and participate or hear further or more detailed discussion to kind of help with your own introspection on your feelings of the show, viewers, listeners. So just so we get that out of the way. So there's a point in either episode 3 maybe or 4 where the wife calls Frank and says, I need you to come sign some paperwork, and he and Lieberman are fighting, and Lieberman says, the wife comes and asks him to sign the paperwork, and Frank's like, I'm not doing that. Like, the whole hitting me with the car thing was just a setup so I can get some leverage on you. And Lieberman says, you need to go sign the paperwork and help this lady out, or else we're not doing, your thing that you need my support with. And that threw me for a loop, because I'm like, your wife thinks she's a widow. Frank Castle's not a bad-looking guy. I'm not sure I send the Viper into my chicken den, right? And the whole time I'm like, is Frank going to screw with this guy? Is Frank actually going to like make a pass at his wife? And he never does that. And I've been sitting patiently, because I figure that what's eventually going to happen is that Frank is going to have a talk with Lieberman and tell him, I'm doing this for you, right? I'm making you watch this so you can see the connection I'm having with your family, and so that you stay in the fight, right? So that you continue to want to get back with your family, because no man wants to see another man becoming a part of his household. I'm expecting that some kind of conversation like that is going to happen. There's kind of a nod to the safe. There's kind of a nod to the safe zone aspect of Frank being in the Lieberman house at the end of episode 6, when the whole reason Frank decides to stay and not take Billy Russo's offer to get a new identity and go to work for Anvil. Frank has that conversation with the wife about, I think I'm figuring out a reason to stay, and I think things are going to get better for the Lieberman family. Because, of course, at that point, Dave is back in, I'll call it the Punisher cave, expecting that Frank is going to leave and take that out. So that's what's tied it all together for me. I watch this show because I thrive on the relationship between Frank Castle and Dave Lieberman. Now, I haven't read the comics, but I want to say the Dave Lieberman character is an actual character in the comics. Okay.
He's not in the one that I read, but I did some backstory, and that was kind of one of the things I was making. He's kind of a different character in the comics. He's an overweight, middle-aged, and he's not as much of a good guy as he is right now. And I think they made him a lot more likable in this TV show. And it's good because it's also a better representation of people in the tech field, because, you know, IT people, they always think that, you know, we're not doing anything and we're just kind of these overweight people who like to play video games and don't talk to anybody. But we're not like that. And David Lieberman is this tech guy, and he kind of makes a pun. He's like, oh, well, I'm not some Silicon Valley app developer, you know? And those type of jokes I really like. And there's a lot of humor that David Lieberman adds in there. For instance, I believe it's episode 5 when they're in the van heading to Gunner's house. Frank's like eating this, like, what is it? It's like this chicken salad.
It's the it's like the dehydrated tuna pack.
Yeah, the dehydrated tuna pack. And David Lieberman pulls out this huge ass sandwich, and he's like, "Where'd you get that?" And he's like, "Oh, I made it. I just had it." And he's like, "Are you sure you didn't buy it?" No. And he just doesn't even offer it. And I'm like, that's worth $1 million. That scene.
It's a great line. Yeah, Frank. Yeah, he breaks out this huge hoagie, and Frank's like, he's like, "Where did you get that?" And Lieberman says, "Oh, I made it." And Frank says, "Did you make?" He's like, "Did you make me one? Did you make me one?" And Lieberman's like, "Well, no, all this stuff was in the fridge." And then what? Yeah, like you said, the really funny thing is, at no point Lieberman has 2 6-inch hoagies. Basically, he's got a 12-inch sub that he's made. He could have offered Frank half. And it's equally hilarious to me that neither, you know, Dave doesn't offer him half, nor does Frank ask for it. So it's one of the best, like, weird comedic routines that's going on between the two of them. But it also works so great as a setup for the deeper scenes that happen across episodes 5 and 6, when Frank gets almost killed, one by his former Marine Corps, Cerberus teammate, Gunnar Henderson, who shoots him with an arrow in the shoulder, and then he takes a couple more rounds when Agent Orange or Agent Rollins' murder team shows up on Gunnar's property, and they get involved in a major firefight. So what are some of the what's one of your big things that's endearing you to the show?
The same thing as you. I really love Micro and Punisher's relationship. I really enjoy the way different take on Billy Russo. I like how they have Karen Page and her interaction with Punisher, and then you add Madani's, interaction that's going to come on with the Punisher. And I feel like there's all these ties that are going to come up. And even I believe Curtis is the black guy's name, and his relationship in there, and I know what you're saying. There's a lot of subplots, but they're all eventually connecting back to the Punisher in one way or the other, and it's all kind of adding dots up.
Yeah, I think it's getting to that point now. It's like I said, episode 4 for me is the tip over episode, and after that, as those, like you said, as those alignments kind of start to fall in place, I feel a little better about what was starting to feel a bit like a kitchen sink series.
In the comics, so this is from the comic that I read with Punisher and Jigsaw. So Jigsaw is like ultimately the biggest villain in the Punisher, and he has a son named Henry, and the wife is Susan, and like dude's like jacked up in the comics and like beats the shit out of his wife and his son, and pretty other nasty things. And so I'm wondering if Madani is going to be this version's Susan, and that they're going to have a son, Henry, and then the son, Billy Russo's son or Jigsaw's son, eventually decides to work with Punisher and not become like his jacked up father. And I don't think we're going to see kind of I think they said Jigsaw would be more season 2. And I think this season is mostly focusing on Rollins, who's Agent Orange. And I didn't really look up his background. I think I read I might be wrong, but I thought he had some ex-Shield affiliation, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So, yeah, I'm not sure where they'll go with the notion of the Jigsaw storyline. Of course, Jigsaw was the enemy, if I remember correctly, in the. I want to say. So what I don't have open on IMDb is all of the iterations of the Punisher. There have been 3 movies of the Punisher. The first having been Dolph Lundgren in his attempt to platform off of the Rocky IV stardom. The
other thing to add, it's so different, Billy's portrayal, because Billy Russo in the comics is no way, shape, or form, I think, a friend with Frank Castle, and the way that he is in the comics, he was a part of the Magia. I don't even know if I said it right. The Magia. Help me out here.
Yeah, no, I have no idea.
Okay. Whatever the Italian street gang is called in the Marvel universe.
I gotcha.
And he's not a soldier at all, so it's totally different.
Right. So I was going to mention that Jigsaw, if I'm not mistaken, Jigsaw. Well, that's it. So that's interesting. So Jigsaw was. I knew Jigsaw was the enemy in the. For some reason, Punisher Warzone does not come up when you search for Punisher on IMDb. Punisher Warzone was the second. I think the second Punisher movie,
which had bad reviews, I think, too.
Yeah, no, that's weird. It was actually the third, which I thought the Thomas Jane one came after the Ray Stevenson one. That's weird. But no, they say Punisher Warzone actually came after the Thomas Jane one. So I actually thought the Thomas Jane Punisher movie was fine. I liked it. Punisher Warzone, to me, was more reflective of the character that I knew from Marvel, just, again, being that ultra-violence. And that, of course, starred Ray Stevenson, who then, when you talk about bringing it full circle in the Marvel universe, then went on to play Volstagg in the MCU in the Thor movies. So, but Jigsaw was the villain in that movie, and I wonder. And his first name was Billy, so I wonder if in that version he was supposed to have been the Billy Russo character as well. So other highlights of the show, other things that are endearing me to it. I don't know that there's that much more. I really like the relationship between Frank and Dave Lieberman. Second most favorite relationship is Frank and Karen Page. I've not been a big fan of the Karen Page character. I really didn't like the vibe with her in the Defenders, and I guess probably what would have been the latter half of the second season of Daredevil, because I just didn't. I got very worn out by this whole notion of her just not accepting that Matt was Daredevil and keep constantly trying to tell him he was going to get himself killed, or this was what he's supposed to be, or he had some kind of weird addiction. I'm like, it's the Marvel universe, people. Like, when people have superpowers, they do stuff. Let's just get over that, right? I felt like that was such a non-story that was created. But I feel like the relationship and the sorrow that she feels for Frank Castle is a much more real storyline, and I feel that in the performances that she's putting forth on this show. So I really like that. And then I guess my third favorite relationship is the relationship between Dina Madani and Sam Stein. Just the whole notion that, like, Sam is an underperforming agent who does not have a big career arc ahead of him. He was kind of subjugated. When excuse me, when the senior agent in charge, Wolf, was there.
And now by Donnie too.
Right, and yes, but he's much more in the forefront, right? He's basically the deputy for that office, and I love the things like the things where first he comes back at her and tells her that she has to earn trust, right? That she can't just boss him around or treat him like crap when he's been the one who stood by her. And then I really love when they're being investigated by the inspector general, and he says he's not going to lie for her, but he does, right? In a moment of character in a test, he decides that he's going to side with his boss and he's going to trust her to ride this out. Also, very interesting scene when they're setting up to do the takedown of the Greek gang to recover the weapons. And I kind of felt like she was a jerk when he was briefing the tactical plan, and she stood up and stood, kind of pushed him out of the way in front of the projector screen and adjusted his plan. And I kind of felt like, again, having kind of been in similar situations, right? Like she's the special agent in charge. She didn't need to stand up. She could have asked him some questions and led him to those conclusions in a public space rather than publicly embarrass him. But I really like how he came back and rather than, I thought certain he was going to dress her down and say, you don't need to personally embarrass me like that. If you're trying to, I need you to support me. You're trying to stand me up and make me this tactical team leader. But actually he came back kind of with his hat in his hand and say, did I get anything right? Did I just completely screw that up? And I felt like she does a good thing by coming back to him and saying, hey, look, your plan was good. It was solid. I just made it a little bit better by making some adjustments. So I really like the relationship with them where there's this back and forth kind of tango of where she's a jerk and then he reminds her that she's being a jerk, and then she comes back a little softer, and then she builds him up. It's kind of a nice little two-step that those two actors are doing between each other. So what else for you? What are your other big highlight moments of the series so far? And as you're spooling up to answer that, also let's go ahead and start talking too about how we feel about how this series compares to the other Marvel shows that we've been watching on Netflix.
I kind of do like the Karen Page interaction, just because that there's somebody from the other parts of the Netflix universe. I don't know what they're going to do with Karen Page because, spoiler, if you haven't read the comics, she gets killed by Bullseye. So that would be interesting to see if that happens, how Frank would react, if he would join up maybe with Daredevil to take down Bullseye. But I do like Karen's interactions more with Punisher than I like with Karen and Daredevil, because I feel Karen, she's not even romantic with Daredevil yet. She's more like this damsel in distress in Daredevil, and I think that's kind of getting old.
So now, didn't they have an intimacy scene in season 2?
I don't remember. It's been a while, but I feel like it wasn't long lasting, if anything.
Okay, all right. I'm with you. If I have my vote, if Netflix cares, my vote is season 3 of Daredevil and season 2 of The Punisher. Let's flip around the Karen Page interaction, right? Let's just have her show up on a couple episodes in Daredevil as a quick cameo, and then let's make her main show appearance occur in The Punisher.
I'm totally with you. I'm totally down for that. Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to ask you is, and maybe I'm kind of coming out of it after having watched episode 6 of The Punisher. So episode 5, we have a sex scene between Amber Rose Riva, who plays Dina Madani, and Ben Barnes, who plays Billy Russo. Now at that point, we don't know that Billy's a bad guy. I want to come back around on that too. We don't know that Billy's a bad guy. It came off as highly unusual to me to have an intimacy scene between two second tier supporting cast members. And it came off as really weird to me. There was some brief nudity in that scene, and I kind of felt it was gratuitous because, again, I was coming out of it, but I was still kind of in this mode where, like, I don't know that I need all of the other subplots, and so I was like, I don't really know why that's in there. I don't know. Did that scene bug you at all?
It did seem a bit overkill. But I'm hoping that it leads to Jigsaw's son Henry in the future. That's my only thing that it's going to have some purpose like that, because Henry is pretty cool character in the comics. And I really hope that, like, I think I remember, I forget what episode 13 is called, but I feel like Punisher right now, what's he going to do after he's killed off all the people that were involved in his family's death, Because, like, in the comics, like, his purpose is kind of like kill drug dealers, kill bad people, So that's what I'm hoping that we see a little bit more of that. And then, like, I think in the comics he's not always teamed up with Micro, but Micro, like, occasionally will drop him some help. And maybe we'll see Madani in that same manner. Occasionally Madani will, like, be like, oh, there's these really bad gangsters. We can't get them, but maybe the Punisher can kill this person. So I'm hoping that's kind of where they're going to bring the Punisher for season 2. And gosh, I'm almost like, I don't know. I'm almost wondering, like, how the Punisher would do if you stuck him in, like, the Avengers movies or something like that. That's probably never going to happen, but it's a thought.
Right. So I want to come back around on Billy Russo a little bit. Did you see that coming?
That scene, I didn't see it coming as soon as it came, but I knew that he's a bad person.
Okay.
And I was shocked. I was like, oh wow, like, I didn't already think he was bad. I think we were going to see him turn bad. I think that's where my shock came from.
Okay. So yeah, I definitely had a feeling that he couldn't be trusted. Once, pretty much about the when I saw the scene, somewhere in between the scene with he and Madani, where Madani tells him that Frank Castle is alive, and him sitting down with Frank to have the beer at the harbor, I was like, I think this guy has gotten crooked. I'm like, Anvil has tons of government contracts, and he's like a multimillionaire now, drives a Jag or a Rolls, whatever that car was. I'm like, I got to believe at the end of the day that Rollins has something to do with his success. So,
well, his the thing that I thought that was out of the blue and kind of concerned me was him calling him on the radio. Like, nobody does that for, like, just because they missed their friend. There must have been some other reason to that. Like, on every hour on the hour, like, that's pretty crazy.
Right. Well, I think it's reflective of the level of importance that Rollins and all those people involved in the heroin ring in Kandahar put on tracking Frank down to make sure that he doesn't reveal them. So, so one negative about the show is I, as you know, one of my big things about this show and origin stories, which I typically hate, and this isn't supposed to be an origin story, is every origin story I spend 70% of the movie, right? However long they take to build the character up to the point where they become that superhero, I spend 70% of the movie, and I'm angry the whole time, saying, put on the damn suit, right? We know you're superhero X. Just put the damn costume on, right? I don't want to see a movie about you fumbling around trying to find your way. I just want you to put the damn suit on, be the hero, and then work out all your issues as the hero, right? I'm kind of getting a little bit of that now because we've seen him in the full Punisher garb with the skeleton on the t-shirt or in the vest and the flak jacket. I'm like, just be the Punisher, dude. Like, he's spending so much of the show not being the Punisher. And the one redeeming thing is that's what Sam Stein refers to him as. Probably 50% of the time is, he calls him Frank Castle every once in a while, but a lot of the time he just says the Punisher, right? And this is crazy. We're going after the Punisher. So that's one of my knocks on the show. Let's go ahead and talk about how we feel the show kind of ranks out against the other Marvel superhero shows on Netflix.
Gosh, I mean, it's really tough because Defenders, I mean, I would have to rate Punishers pretty up there for me with Jessica Jones and Daredevil. If I had to rate it, I would still say Daredevil's number one. Number two, I think now has got to be Punisher. And number three, I would say Jessica Jones, and then Luke Cage, then Iron Fist, then Defenders is kind of at the bottom.
Wow. Okay. So, very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, from what I've seen, both like in the Geeks Worldwide chat and on Twitter, it seems like there's a solid block of people who are not fans of this show, and also we're not fans of the Defenders. The Defenders, for me, is number one. Admittedly, I have not finished watching all of Daredevil, but to me, that's a knock on that show, just because I find an inability to stick with it. And I have not watched Jessica Jones, which I know has been raved about. So for the shows that I have watched, which for me has been The Defenders, Luke Cage, The Punisher, and Iron Fist. Right now, Defenders for me is top because at the end of the day, all these things for me are about relationships. As a comic book kid growing up, the comics I gravitated to, and it's actually how I got started, were always the team comics, right? Like, I didn't really read Batman. I wanted to see Batman in the Justice League. And when I first got into comics, the first comics I went and grabbed an issue of the Avengers, and I went and grabbed an issue of Justice League, because I figured if I wanted to figure out who all these characters are in these universes, I need to start with the book that just has them all in it. So to me,
and yet you're not a big fan of the X-Men. Sorry, just have to put that in there.
You're correct. I'm not. I'm not a huge fan. Just to get it out, I'm not a huge fan because of the things that have been done. I love Generation 2 of the X-Men. I love what I call X-Men International, which was the introduction of all of the X-Men from that were not American white people. No offense, but I love them bringing in Thunderbird, and even I don't like Wolverine as a character in the comics, but I accept that bringing him in from Canada and creating that bridged relationship with Alpha Flight, and I love Alpha Flight. I love the introduction of Colossus, being Russian. So I love that stuff. But then some other pieces fall apart. But that's a different show. So for me, Defenders is top because, and I thought about this before coming into the show, Defenders has its problems. But if you recall, all our conversations when we were doing Marvel Knights was many, many, many times I would forgive 35 minutes of that show and its problems because they had 10 minutes of Luke Cage and Danny Rand finally getting together, right? Or the fight scene, right? Or the big fight where Jessica Jones comes back and joins the team. Like, those scenes of those four characters working together and their interrelationships were great, and I forgave the show for a lot of the other missteps around that. So, and for me, Defenders is a tie with Luke Cage because I felt I loved the story of Luke Cage and that character and his struggle and kind of coming through that arc. And yes, it was also a slow burn. Punisher, and I like Iron Fist, and I know lots of people didn't, but what that really leaves is for me to break out then Punisher in comparison to the Defenders and Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, and Punisher lands in the middle. I liked Iron Fist, but one of the things I felt Iron Fist struggled with was too many villains. Which one was I really supposed to care about, and which one was really the threat? Like, you had two different fingers of the hand, but they were working separately and were their own factions. and then you had the father and the partner of Rand's father, as well as for a period of time. I can't remember that guy's name off the top of my head, but the son was the enemy, and then there was a time period where the son and the daughter, the brother sister, were his enemy. So I liked Danny Rand in it and his relationship with Connie, but there were too many enemies for me to focus on and figure out who was really the bad guy.
Iron Fist, you didn't see a lot of action with Danny until like the very end of it, and I feel like Danny and the Defenders, there was a lot more. I mean, the start of the season was Danny against the Hand.
Well, the truth of the matter is, Defenders is really like Iron Fist Part 2.
It is, yeah, pretty.
It's all about bridging what's going on with him and the Iron Fist and getting back to Kunlun. So, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know. It makes me wonder if they're gonna just keep now these 5 established characters in Netflix, or if they're gonna keep going and try to add another, character. I mean, if we recap all the new characters that we've seen on Netflix, we got Iron Fist, Luke Cage, and Punisher this year. So, are we expecting to see another 3? Are we expecting to see 1 or 2, or just see more of the same in 2018?
I'm not sure, and of course, what makes this really interesting is the purchase of Fox by Disney, right? And when that deal closes, and what they may put into pre-production now or production now. How many things are tied up in contracts that were already in flight that may delay Disney taking those X-Men universe characters and putting them to use. It's very interesting to me to contemplate, what happens if. So to me, just the way that they're filmed and the size of the stage they're on, I'm perfectly fine with The Gifted staying on Fox, but I also think the Gifted is a show that would work really good as a Netflix series, and seeing some interaction between that group and the Defenders might work well. So yeah, I'm curious too as to how much more Netflix is going to do. I kind of feel like these 5 characters are kind of the right size of this micro MCU on Netflix. I don't know that it needs to get any bigger. The one thing that I can definitively say I would love to see on Netflix is I would love to see a Moon Knight show. But I don't want the hyper, like, we've had enough years of the Mark Spector crazy and schizophrenia in the comic. Like, I don't need to see that in the show. And if they do have it in the show, I don't need that to be the focal point of the show, and to make it ridiculously over the top. But I actually think a Moon Knight show that starts off with him sane as he was in the comics for many years and not having all that split personality stuff would work well. And then you can cap that character off right after, like, in the 4th season with him going insane. And then, like, end the show with him being committed into an asylum or something. But so I guess overall I feel like drop one X-Men show into that universe and maybe do one other character, and I think that's as large as that Netflix universe needs to be. I don't know. What are your desires, thoughts, predictions?
So I'm still been trying to keep up with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and while this is turning out to be an interesting season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I honestly think that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to start to run out. And I think that they should keep Ghost Rider going, but I think Ghost Rider would be a great addition to Netflix.
I agree, and it's funny, right? Because it's all coming back to the same pattern from the comics, right? So all those characters. So we've got Elektra on Netflix, we've got the Punisher on Netflix, we've got Ghost Rider on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and we have a Deadpool movie. Those 4 characters were the last iteration of the Thunderbolts, right? Or the last iteration before Secret War Battle World. So yeah, I think all of them in some context. Deadpool definitely. Ryan Reynolds is doing his thing, and I think that's great. But I think you could easily intermix Punisher, Ghost Rider, and Elektra, um, and maybe take one other character and put them on a Thunderbolts team in that Netflix universe.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I'd hate to say it, but Marvel is really starting to, with Punisher, and it's really sad to see how bad the CW and all of them are doing compared to Marvel's rise.
Yeah, that is, and I haven't been watching the CW shows this season, so I don't really have a judgment on how they're doing. I know I've seen things with people having problems of how the shows are doing this season in comparison to others, but I've also seen fans who are sticking with them. So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. Any other thoughts on the Punisher, Dave, before we get out of here and rejoin for our follow up episode where we will cover the remainder of season 1 of the Punisher, basically episode 7 through 13?
Yeah, I actually don't want to see the Punisher go back to his classic outfit, kind of like how Luke Cage has a new kind of look going for him. I'm actually hoping for Daredevil, because it was weird in the comics. Daredevil got this kind of new outfit. It was kind of black with a little bit of red, but then Daredevil's gone back to his original outfit. But I would still like to see Daredevil kind of with a new modern look in season 3. So I'm okay that he's ditched the skull. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with the Punisher. If he's going to make any cameos into any of the other series, I can definitely see him kind of run into Jessica Jones, maybe. I don't see him crossing paths again with Daredevil because we've already seen that. So that's kind of my take there. I'm really enjoying it. I really like the whole side story about PTSD with Lewis and Frank. Talking about being a soldier at home and how he had a hard time separating that with his family life, and he feels guilty that he felt that he killed his family. And a lot of that is just kind of very moving to me. And I mean, I can look back to say, in Iron Fist, there's kind of small talks about, mental illness, Jessica Jones, bisexuality, you could put that in there. And there's kind of these social things that are intermixed in these Netflix shows. And I like that more, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of thoughtfulness and intelligence in these shows. It's more, I think it's more serious and less fun than the Avengers, because the Avengers seems to be more about the fun, the action, and the story, and not so much no serious topics mentioned.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm right there with you. All right, well, that's going to do it for us. We're going to go ahead and get out of here for the night because it is approaching midnight on my end of the coast, end of the world, country, whatever. So thanks so much for joining in for this inaugural episode of E2KG Entertainment Crew's Street Level Podcast. We will definitely be back with episode 2 next week, covering episodes 7 through 13 of The Punisher. Please feel free to hit us up either on Geeks Worldwide or on our own YouTube channel, the E2KG Network, which you can see right there in my lower third. You can follow the tweet, you can follow the Twitter channel, and then obviously easily from there you can go see us on YouTube. So I know that the YouTube channels are a little disorganized right now. I plan on working on that over the holidays. Who definitely had some impacts on my time with going to a new job and moving the network or partnering the network with Geeks Worldwide. So hopefully I'll be able to get back and do some administrative house cleaning over the break. So thanks so much for joining in. Please check in with us next week where we will be right back here in these same seats on the same channel, hopefully at an earlier time to discuss to do our part 2 discussion of The Punisher. Thanks so much for joining in with us tonight. That's going to do it for us. We are out of here.